On February 7, 1963, Theodore Shaughnessy, known as Ted to everyone in his life, was born as the youngest of 3 children. I am completely enamored with Tim and Tom, his 2 elder brothers. Ted, Tom, and Tim. I think that is the greatest thing I have ever heard. Growing up in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, Ted developed an early fascination with traveling at the speed of cars. And as an adult, he carried this trait with him. He had a passion for go-karting and fast automobiles. Tom, his brother, said he was totally fearless. Ted met Corey Gorman, a woman, at a video arcade in Phoenix early in the 1980s. They simply shared so many things in common. And they were hitched by the late 1980s. After that, they relocated to Austin, Texas, where they co-founded Gallery Jewelers, an upscale jewelry company. And they worked closely together to grow this company. One of their many shared hobbies that had initially drawn them together was jewelry. Corey put in extra time in the background. The appraiser was her. In school, she pursued studies in both gemology and fine art. Thus, she evaluated the diamonds and jewels. Ted was also the store's face since he had a natural ability to connect with people. He was an amiable man who enjoyed interacting with new people. Todd Cole, a close friend of Ted's, claimed he had never heard anything negative uttered about him. "I hoped I would be like that," he said. "I'd heard that I would be doomed to be around Ted forever since he was just so gregarious and everyone were drawn to him." Simply said, he was a really fantastic friend. Simply incredibly enjoyable to be around. His wife Corey also said, quote, "I didn't hurt anyone who didn't like him. He was described as a very talkative, gregarious, enthusiastic, and engaging individual. He was able to strike up a conversation with almost anyone and had a natural ability to put people at ease. In fact, while he was working at the store, he became friends with some of the patrons." Karen Tana was a woman who belonged to this group. One day, she entered the jewelry store as a customer. They struck up a discussion, and the rest is history thanks to Ted. They grew close to one another. She also made friends with Corey. You know, they were all quite close. His enormous heart made him an easy guy to adore and get along with. In addition to being incredibly giving to those who were close to him, he also never bought anything from strangers. According to his sister-in-law, he was the kind of guy who would buy food for the customers in front of him in the grocery store checkout line. When he was going through a difficult period, his brother Tim claimed to have discreetly taught him money interest-free. He never pestered him to repay the money to him within a specific amount of time or anything like. It was never a big thing, he just wanted to help people. He would never go around telling everyone. Because he truly wanted to help people out of the goodness of his heart, he carried out his actions in silence. Together, the charities had created an incredible life by the year 2000. Their firm was prosperous. Just down Oliver Drive from the shop, they had purchased a lovely home in a fantastic neighborhood, 9000 Oliver Drive. They were like parents to their 2 dogs, Bart and Brianna, who were enormous, rambunctious dogs. They simply loved these canines. Ted used to bring them in to work with him as if they were little or large retail clerks. Ted and Corey were infatuated with each other, and they were both large canines. They were hailed as the ideal couple by everyone they knew. One item was all that was lacking. Their dream was to become parents. So they took a plane to Ukraine in the spring of 2000 to adopt Nicholas, a 16-month-old son. And throughout his entire life, he went by Nick. And it was love at first sight for Ted and Corey. They had an incredible time with Nick, and they were also wonderful parents. There was a lot of love in their home, and they were a close-knit family. Ted was a tremendously proud parent, and everyone in their lives knew it. Had Nick and I been practically attached at the hip. Nick would be involved in any action Ted took, and he developed into a nice-looking, intelligent young man over time. In many ways, he followed in his father's footsteps. Like his father, he was a big fan of fast automobiles. They would frequently go-karting together. Ted would frequently take Nick to the racetrack because he was an avid race car driver. Nick also had a strong entrepreneurial spirit, most likely as a result of his parents' successful business startup. So Nick felt a little bit of their business acumen. He began peddling candy bars out of his high school locker as early as middle school. He launched a rather successful automobile detailing business while still a high school student. He had 4 staff working for him at one point. In addition, in 2015, he made the acquaintance of Jacqueline Edson, a girl. She had recently relocated to Texas from New Jersey. In the same year, she and Nick clicked right away. After they began dating, they were essentially always together. Following their high school graduation, Jackie and Nick moved into an off-campus townhouse in a college station, where Jackie would attend Texas A&M University to get her engineering degree while Nick would work from home as a day trader. After that, they would travel to Austin, Texas for Ted and Corey's visitation every weekend, which took 2 hours. And then this seemingly ideal family's life would be irrevocably altered on March 2nd, 2018, 4:30 in the morning, as well as Korean. Ted and his 2 dogs were sound asleep in bed when the dogs began barking at something. Furthermore, it wasn't exceptionally unusual. Occasionally the dogs would bark in the backyard at a possum or a deer. There was nothing to be extremely worried about. Ted, however, walked outside to look into it while Corey went back to sleep. Just as he was putting her head back on the pillar, she heard a gunshot in the kitchen, followed by a flurry of bullets. He also armed himself with a .45 caliber revolver as he headed outside to look into it. Naturally, she jumps out of bed the moment she gets there. She pulls out her own .357 revolver, which she had kept over her bed for years. She also witnessed her cherished dog being shot and killed at the doorway as the invader got closer to the bedroom. She continued to fire at the doorway until she ran out of ammunition, at which point she fled into the bedroom closet to hide. She was concerned that the intruder would find her in this closet door at any time and that she was helpless, so she dialed 911. Her bullets are run out. They will simply shoot her to death. Living in the city is Travis County 911. My dogs were working while my hubby left. Shots were fired. He was the target of gunfire. Furthermore, I'm not sure. Aid me. That night when my mother calls, it breaks my heart. She also mentions to the dispatcher that she heard moaning sounds during the call, but she wasn't sure if Ted was making those noises or if it was one of the invaders that she had shot. However, her only thought was that, if it was Ted, he was dying in the wilderness by himself without her presence. She acknowledged as much to the dispatcher, adding that she was going to head out there to spend time with Ted, in the event that Ted was involved. The dispatcher replied, "No way" in response. "Keep out of this closet. It's not secure." The operator eventually informs her that the police ought to be outside her house after 15 minutes. She then exits the closet. She's crossing the kitchen to get to the front door, and as she passes through the kitchen, she discovers her 30-year married husband lying lifeless in a puddle of his own blood and encircled by bullet shells. Oh my God. She goes on to open the front door for emergency personnel, and she opens the front door when she gets there. Nobody is that, not the invaders, not the first responders, because the wrong house was really visited by the cops. They eventually find the right house and meet Cora at the front door. They had gone to her neighbor's house. She is utterly distraught, which is, precisely what you would anticipate after such a horrific tragedy. She's trembling all over. After that, they lead her to the squad car and place her inside while first responders enter. At 5:14 a.m., they declared Ted Shaughnessy deceased. When Corey called her 19-year-old son Nick to tell him that his father had just been slain, Nick was in complete astonishment after Corey had shot him 4 times. He left right after for his parents' house in Austin, Texas, a 2-hour journey from College Station, with his girlfriend Jackie, and they arrived there at 8 in the morning. They chose to live with Corey for the following 3 months in order to be there for her and provide her with the comfort and support she so much needed during that difficult period. She had been married to Ted for 30 years, and if they hadn't moved in together, she would have spent a lot of time alone in this large house without her spouse, without her dog, and in the same home where her husband had been killed. And while she was there, no one in the town could believe Ted was gone until news got out about the situation. And the Shaughnessy family received an enormous amount of support. Ted was a force of life, according to his friend Todd Cole. It was difficult to accept that life's energy had vanished. Vicky, Todd's wife, added that quiet has no bad bones in that man's physique. He was a humble gift, and he ought to live to be 100 years old and experience life. Stated a different court. In a circumstance where his and his wife's lives were in danger, Ted Shaughnessy died doing just what everyone who knew him knew he would do. By giving his wife Corey a few crucial seconds to retaliate, he prevented her death. Investigators so started working right away. Naturally, they began by conducting a thorough search of the house and the kitchen, the scene of Ted's shooting. It was discovered that the shell casings actually came in two distinct calibers. Given that a .380 and a .40 caliber handgun had both been used, it seemed likely that a shoot was engaged. No evidence of forced entry was present. Additionally, they discovered that Nick's former bedroom had an open window and that the window's security screen had been taken off the exterior. Thus, it was thought that this was where the attacker entered. A fingerprint was discovered on the window as well. The same room had a dress and a .40 caliber handgun box in the dresser's bottom drawer, so that was also sent off for testing. However, the gun was not in its box. And in the whole house, that was the only item missing. It goes without saying that a .40 caliber handgun was one of the weapons used in the incident. Therefore, there's a good chance that the Shaughnessy Earn gun was used in the killing. Since the proprietors of this upscale diamond company reside in this expansive, exquisite home, it stands to reason that the first and most likely explanation that the investigators considered was the possibility that this was a heist gone bad. As they were interviewing some of their neighbors, they spoke with Kim, the Shaughnessy neighbor next door. She also mentioned that the fact that they are a jewelry store is quite well known across the area. She said, "It's not cheap jewelry, just so you know. I'm talking about jewelry worth hundreds or perhaps millions of dollars." In order to help with the investigation, because, of course, in a situation like this, you always have to look into and remove the family members, police also went and interviewed Nick, and Corey and Jackie turned over their phones. In addition, Ted's family wished to assist law enforcement in their investigation and in apprehending his perpetrator by any means possible. Naturally, the first thing they did when Nick went for his interview was to make sure he had an alibi, which he did. His phone records demonstrated that, at the time of the murder, he was 2 hours away in College Station. In an effort to aid with the inquiry, Nick also told them this when they searched through his phone. However, the Shaughnessy's had a home security system, which he could access via an app or his phone. He assisted his parents with this system because they weren't very tech-savvy. In reality, the security system had not been activated. Ted and Corey essentially just mentioned it when they were leaving the house, or if the bar is at home, they don't bother to turn on their home security system, therefore it wasn't on at the time of the murder. However, it did continue to offer some useful information. Thus, it demonstrated that at 4:27 a.m., Nick's previous bedroom window had been opened. At 4:44 a.m., 17 minutes later, the system warned of glass breaking in the kitchen. Additionally, this is roughly when Corey claimed that the shooting had place. That's probably what caused the glass to crack. This implied that the murderers, Ted confronted the invaders after they had been inside the Shaughnessy residence for 17 minutes. Since these burglars were obviously well-known high-end jewelry merchants, they had 17 minutes to check about the house for something to steal. The house would have been filled with expensive jewelry. They were extremely wealthy. In the house, they had a safe. Thus, there was plenty of items for them to pilfer. They were easy pickings for an intruder. And according to Corey, this was a robbery gone bad. However, since nothing was taken from the house, as I mentioned earlier, investigators concluded that this was implausible. That .40 caliber handgun was the only item missing. There were no indications of forced entry, so detectives just concluded that something about the heist gone wrong idea did not make together. Not a single item was taken. Since they knew Corey was inside the house, they could have tried to coerce her into opening the safe or giving them access to some cash or valuables, for example, by holding her at gunpoint. Furthermore, they didn't. Because of this, authorities were certain that the invaders were known to the Shaughnessy family and that the attack was intended to harm them. Furthermore, they think that the missing .40 caliber handgun played a role in both the shooting and the murder. And why would a potential attacker enter the residence unarmed, without a gun of their own? It's likely that they were aware that the .40 caliber weapon was inside. The Shaughnessy driveway was also home to at least 3 autos. Therefore, it would have been evident to any trespasser that someone was hurt and that dogs began barking. In other words, not only would the dogs have protected the injured party, but they would also have made the intruder aware that something was amiss. This is especially true in Texas, where it is common for people to carry guns, as evidenced by the fact that the man who was living alone had about 20 guns in his home. For these reasons, detectives were interested in exploring various scenarios other than a botched heist. Nick really provided them a handful of leads to follow up on throughout their interview. Thus, he related to them an incident that occurred during Ted's time as a pawn shop owner in the 1990s. Basically, when these armed robbers entered the store, they started shooting. Ted, who was armed as well, fired back, wounding one of the robbers. After then, they received a prison sentence for their attempted heist. Nick then suggested that it's conceivable they were released from prison and intended to exact revenge on Ted for putting them there. Naturally, investigators investigated this possibility, but they found no proof that these men had been in the vicinity of the Shaughnessy residence at the time of the murder. This lead ultimately proved to be fruitless. The second piece of information, or the other lead, that Nick provided them with during his interview was that he had actually conducted some kind of investigation for Sean because Kim, his neighbor, who I previously said, believed her husband was having an extramarital affair. She so essentially paid Nick to accompany him here on 2 or 3 separate occasions, and she went along with this woman's husband to the hotels that he was escorting women to. He also installed a tracker on the man's vehicle so Kim could find out where he was and whether he was telling the truth about where he was. This man might have wanted Nick dead, or his father, or Nick himself, to keep him from telling his wife anything. It's possible that he paid someone to go kill his wife because he wanted her dead. After that, they just went to the wrong address, as Kim's house was the one that the police had visited rather than Corey and Ted's. Therefore, anybody could make that error and mix that up if the police could. One of the 3 vehicles I stated earlier that was parked in front of his home was a white Mercedes. Kim had a white Mercedes as well. Both the area and the house they resided in were dark. As a result, it was incredibly dark. The dwellings all had a similar appearance, therefore it wasn't all that far. When investigators approached him to inquire more, she verified what Nick had stated, namely that she had paid him 2 or 3 times to track her soon-to-be ex-husband. However, she said he was never informed. She kept Nick's request to do this a secret from him. She added that she had no fear for her life. There was nothing to gain for her husband in having her killed. Quietly, she remarked, "He's definitely alive, but I don't think he's capable of that, therefore this was just one more fruitless lead for the detectives." Because they had nowhere else to look, investigators began to focus on Corey and began to investigate her as a potential suspect. Detectives had an unfavorable impression of her because of a few details in her account of the events and her behavior following them, which cast her as somewhat suspect. The first big question was, after all, why the attackers left her alive. They were aware of her badness. She fired at them until her ammunition ran out. Why, then, didn't they make an effort to track her down and murder her, or at the very least persuade her to give them some jewelry or say anything? They also questioned her regarding the missing .40 caliber weapon from its case in that drawer in the dresser. She then informed them, we have a lot of guns for protection in different places. All that happened was that when she brought them to the jewelry store, the gun wasn't there. Furthermore, she was unable to locate it anywhere in the house. "We have a lot of guns, so we have a lot of gun cases in various closets," she continued. "It's not important, I promise." But the police just thought that was incredibly bizarre. In addition, she was Ted's only beneficiary under his $1 million life insurance policy, which she attempted to obtain shortly after Ted passed away. You see, without Ted, he served as the company's public face. He represented the jewelry company well. She was therefore having a lot of trouble surviving without him. That's the reason she tried to receive the money from the life insurance policy when she called the firm to say, "Hey, I'm just waiting on this to be paid out. Could you explain the situation to me?" They essentially informed her that she was a suspect in her husband's murder, thus they couldn't give it to her. And that's how Corey discovered she was even under suspicion. She is currently having difficulty accepting her husband's passing. She will have to shut down the company that they founded together since, well, it's sort of Ted's legacy. And now law enforcement is looking into her as well. She claimed that the cops were constantly passing the house in unmarked automobiles, which made them very evident. When an unmarked police car drove by the house, she could always tell. Regarding Corey, one of Vicky's Shaughnessy friends commented, "Quiet, she must be among the strongest individuals I've ever encountered." It's not that she wasn't feeling anything on the inside, it's just the way she handles things and moves past them. It's beyond my imagination. Additionally, Corey is an individual without Ted, as her friend Karen put it. However, they truly were a cohesive group. They were buddies with one another. Adding to the already overwhelming news she was currently receiving, detectives who had gone to Nick and Jackie's house to conduct a search had discovered a marriage certificate. Thus, in the summer of 2017, 8 months earlier, they had secretly tied the knot. Neither Ted nor Corey had been informed. It was through detectives that she was learning about it for the first time. Additionally, when Nick originally brought Jackie home in 2016, she wasn't exactly a huge fan. It was quite a bit to take in, as you might understand, that they had married so young and secretly without notifying anyone. But she greeted Jackie with open arms as soon as she learned of the marriage. She desired for her to have a familial sense of belonging. She then hosted a reception for them. In addition, she gave Jackie a half-carat diamond pendant as a sort of wedding present. Arranging this celebration for her son and her new daughter-in-law was a pleasant diversion from their ongoing suffering and another pleasant diversion while they attempted to maintain the business. It was Nick's agreement to work at Gallery Jewelry. They were quite happy that Jackie decided to assist out by skipping the remainder of the school year. They were eager to continue operating the company. They were thrilled to use the company to carry on Ted's legacy. The statement on the family's official Facebook page read, quote, "We are delighted to announce that Nicholas, Ted's son, will be continuing his legacy here at Gallery." Police, meantime, received the results from the fingerprint they discovered on the house's open window, and it matched one of the company's employees, Renault Abai Anderson, which operates something akin to a door and window company. And it was a bit of a bust because this person assembled windows. That would have been his fingerprint, the same one he used to install the window. Nor did he reside in Texas. At all, he was a Minnesotan. However, the officers were not taking him out of the window just yet. It was obviously the point of entry for the attacker. And they recalled that, during their questioning with Nick, he disclosed that he had secretly utilized that window to enter and exit his home when he got home after drinking and other instances. He would use the window as a cover. Upon being questioned by detectives about who else was aware of this window, he replied that his friend Spencer was. In a way, Spencer was Nick's soul buddy. I believe that although he didn't have many friends, he did have one best buddy, and they were very sophisticated since, although not even Nick's family was aware of his marriage to Spencer, did he indeed preside at their wedding? Additionally, Nick provided detectives with some information regarding Spencer's interview, saying, quote, "He's not as fortunate as I am to have parents that will help him like mine, or he hated every minute of his miserable Home Depot job, so he walked there. Additionally, he studies for his classes at Texas when he isn't there." Detectives, you can probably understand how this appears to this unfortunate man. It's not like he has a lot of money. He despises his work and is aware of the lucrative opportunities. He is aware that their home is equipped with a safe. Where's the safe? He knows. He is skilled at entering and leaving their home covertly. He is aware of this window, which the attackers used as their obvious port of entry. The handguns used in the shooting, which were chambered in .40 and .380 caliber, were still being sought after by detectives. Additionally, Nick admitted to the cops during his questioning that he had handed Spencer a .380 caliber revolver. As expected, Spencer was contacted by authorities, and he was generally very cooperative with them. He said that he was aware of the window because he and Nick used to enjoy beverages at the Shaughnessy house, which resembled a barn on the grounds in the backyard. They would enter and exit the home through Nick's bedroom window on their way to the barn. Investigators also looked through his car and residence. Additionally, they discovered the .380 caliber handgun that Nick had given him inside his car. However, they discovered that this gun was not used in the incident when they performed ballistics on it. So the fact that Nick had given him a .380 caliber handgun was just a coincidence. Additionally, according to his farm records, he was not in the vicinity of the Shaughnessy residence at the time of the murder. He was hurt. It is evident that he was not engaged in the murder, even if investigators thought he was concealing something. Thus, he was declared not to be a suspect. But their entire line of inquiry with Spencer actually pointed them in the direction of Nick Shaughnessy, a new suspect. It was evident to them that he was the one who had given them Spencer's name. He informed them that Spencer was poor, detested his work, knew how to sneak into the house, and possessed the gun, all of which raises grave suspicions. Naturally, he wants to assist discover the person who killed his father, but this, combined with all of his other activities since then, has left him extremely skeptical. Naturally, since the murder, detectives have been monitoring Jackie, Nick, and Corey, as well as the entire Shaughnessy family. And from the minute Nick arrived at the Shaughnessy house on the morning of the incident, his strange conduct really began to pile up. He was far too willing to assist. He was practically ecstatic. It wasn't like, "I want to do everything in my power to help you find this guy." It seemed more like he was enthusiastic about it and wanted to lead investigators in 1,000 directions. It was he who introduced them to Spencer. It was he who informed them of the 1990s armed robbery episode. About the neighbor, he informed them. It was him who informed investigators that his parents had a security system and that he could access it all using a mobile app. He could remotely activate it and deactivate it from his phone, as he pleased. In addition, he had a security system of his own in his College Station townhouse with Jackie. He also said, "Oh, you know, if you want to prove that I wasn't involved, well, here's a video footage of me and Jackie at home at the time of the murder on the morning that he arrived at the Shaughnessy house as well, right at the start of his interview with the police." Similar to the morning of the murder, he was nearly too curious. He was going about asking everyone questions and doing in-person interviews with all of the neighbors in an attempt to get as much information as possible. It's not so unusual, that he asked one of the first responders on the site if his dad had suffered. All right, his father was just killed. It doesn't seem strange to me that he would want to know if his dad stuffed it. His desire to learn as much as possible doesn't seem strange to me. First responders and detectives did comment that the manner he was asking these questions and conducting his inquiries was unusual. On its alone, though, I don't find it odd. It's really odd when you combine all of these things with some of his other odd habits. For instance, detectives were out and about the morning following his father's murder. The family was being tested for gunshot residue, and they were collecting DNA, fingerprints, and other personal information. At one point, when they are testing Nick, they ask him to turn around so they can collect his fingerprints even though he is looking away from the cops. And he kind of hops around in a way that seems delighted, almost like a schoolboy. He was laughing and making jokes. Additionally, his behavior seemed a little strange given that his family had just experienced this awful tragedy. Furthermore, he went directly to the window from his previous bedroom, the one the attackers had used to enter the house, as soon as he arrived at the scene. And he seemed to be looking at it. He just went straight for it, so they just thought it was incredibly strange. Furthermore, he had not yet paid back the $30,000 that his parents had genuinely taught him. They borrowed him this money to help launch his day trading business, but he hadn't paid it back. As you may recall, Jackie's parents paid for his engineering degree at university and his day job at Harlem Day Trading. Todd Cole, a close friend of his father, was also very encouraging and handed him $5,000 to invest on his behalf. Additionally, some of his monthly costs such as gas, insurance, and car payments were covered by Ted and Corey. And they were operating under a type of agreement whereby they would cover the costs. After that, he would reimburse them. But he later ceased making payments to them. And while though his parents were tremendously proud of him and eager to see him succeed in life, this undoubtedly caused a great deal of strain in their relationship, and in the months preceding the murder, they had a few disputes concerning it. His parents, after all, didn't even encourage him to pursue day trading. It was their hope that after he went to College Station with Jackie and she enrolled in college, he would become bored at home and she would encourage him to do the same. Additionally, they informed him that this $30,000 served as his education money and that after it was gone, there would be no more. You must find employment. We're not going to fund this any longer, However, the primary point of contention between them were the monthly costs they were bearing for him, and he was making amends. But he stopped after that. And he continued to show up at the house he and Jackie were in, wearing brand new clothes and shoes, even though he had stopped paying them back. Their flat was filled with shiny new items. It is evident that he was spending money on wants rather than necessities. They chose to cut him off as a result, and he was upset about it. They were also fighting among themselves. They figured it all out in the end. He resumed making payments to them. Not only that, but the family had reconciled and there were no longer these heated arguments. However, investigators found that the incident was undoubtedly suspicious. The timing of it all, When they arrived at Nick and Jackie's apartment, they discovered an ammunition box inside. Additionally, the ammo bore the identical brand and caliber of bullets discovered at the crime site. Additionally, this box was missing 6 rounds. I'm looking into Nick and Jackie's phone records more. It was also discovered that he had misled them on his most recent visit to Austin. His phone records revealed that he had visited his parents on February 28th. even though he had claimed in his interview that he hadn't seen them in a month. Thus, 2 days before the issue. Additionally, they discovered that there was a noticeable void on the phones of Nick and Jackie, the 19-year-olds who were constantly using their phones and sending texts as well as using social media. Therefore, it's extremely odd that these two 19-year-olds would experience these sporadic gaps on both of their phones at the same time, indicating that they may have factory reset their phones or erased a significant amount of data. However, I believe that everyone in this room is aware that everything you erase from your phone never really goes away, and they haven't even erased their messages or any other data from their other Apple products. Investigators discovered that everything that had vanished from their phones was really on his computer, and it was evident why he and Jackie had sought to remove everything. There were some fairly damning texts from the days preceding the incident that suggested a scheme including murder for hire, and allow me to read you a few of these texts, as they are essentially a smoking gun as of February 23rd. Jackie asks Nick via text, do they want $50,000 additionally? She states that we are unable to make the half payment before February 28th. Nick texts Jackie, asking if she would like to withdraw $1,000. Additionally, phone records and bank records indicate that she did indeed withdraw that amount of money and that their financial situation was far worse than Nick's parents were aware of. Additionally, Nick and his neighbor exchanged texts. Nick had not returned the $20,600 that she had lent him, and she was threatening to inform his parents about it all if he didn't reimburse her as soon as possible. Subsequently, screenshots from another text exchange between Nick and Jackie revealed that they had less than $2 in each of their bank accounts. Additionally, according to Nick's phone records, he entered his parents' home security system at 5:39 a.m., which means that he was alerted to the murder of his father and the attack 5 minutes earlier than expected. Therefore, before he was purportedly informed of the issue, he was already awake and keeping an eye on things. He shouldn't have recognized anything wasn't right at that point. He had no business getting on their security system. Furthermore, you would expect that if he did use the security system for some unconnected purpose, he would detect a problem and attempt to get in touch with his parents. However, he didn't. Detectives actually went and questioned his friend Spencer again because, as I mentioned before, they had suspected that Spencer was hiding something from them. His mom called 5 minutes later, and he appeared to be utterly astonished by the whole incident to his father. Furthermore, Spencer discloses in this follow-up interview that Nick had in fact made a payment offer for him to murder his parents. Quiet, Spencer added, was what Nick had instructed him. He would be able to if his parents were to pass away, since I will have $8 million after my parents' guard. Each of them is insured for $1 million against death. That makes $2 million. He would win them over. They own everything they own, even the jewels, which I assume came to a whopping $8 million. You're right on with the investigation, Ali. Since Corey believed they were headed in the wrong direction, she really hired Austin defense lawyer Rick Flores to look out for her kid. She reasoned that their kid, for whom they had given everything every chance, lot $30,000, and an abundance of love and support, could not have done anything like this, and that they were pursuing him in the same manner that they had pursued her. No manner is possible. However, as the weeks passed, Rick Flores became aware that Nick's situation was not improving. So he said to the police, look, could you please tell me if an arrest is about to happen? And they did just that, seeing Rick Arsenault and Jackie enter his office and be arrested over 3 months after Ted's murder on May 29, 2018. Ed for unlawfully requesting the death penalty. Corey was devastated and certain that there had been some sort of error because she was unaware of any of the information that the detectives had. Imagine, for example, that your dog, best friend, and husband of 30 years had all been murdered almost in front of you, as well as your son and his girlfriend, whom you adore. They move in with you for 3 months to help and console you at the most trying and painful period of your life. You support them and trust them with everything. Finally, following those 3 months, they are, incidentally, taken into custody. It's crazy. Jackie was granted bond and released after 2 weeks. For Corey, it was almost a relief because she realized that the case was probably going to come apart. They'd been freed. Nixon, it wasn't the case that everything was a huge mistake. Investigators were aware that Nick and Jackie had nothing to do with the Madison cells. It's obvious that they were in danger. The person saw on their home security camera, whichever it may be, 2 hours away at the time of the killing. However, they thought they were the ones who planned the entire incident and had employed these two individuals to murder Nick's parents. To establish that Nick and Jackie were responsible, they also needed to track down these gunmen. They then reviewed every video that was captured on camera at Nick and Jackie's flat. At that point, they come across some camera footage from February 28th. Thus, the situation with random males in the residence was only 2 days prior. Eventually, one of the guys leaves, and he's wearing a t-shirt from Renew by Anderson, the same business that made the Windsor fingerprint. After contacting the company, detectives learned that Cameron was Mac, the man who had broken into Nick and Jackie's apartment. In reality, he was not related to the worker whose print appeared on the glass. That was just a very fortunate coincidence. However, investigators visited Cameron at home to talk with him. He was not present. The reason the cops were there was obvious to his wife, who was present. She also revealed to them that her husband had been requested to kill someone for money by a man by the name of Johnny Leone. In essence, he requested Cameron to assist him with some relocating, but Cameron discovered that Nick genuinely wanted his parents murdered when they arrived at his place. He didn't want to get involved, so he left. When he arrived, he assumed they were relocating. Police then locate Johnny Leone, age 21, question him, and make the arrest for capital murder. He first disputes everything, but after being shown a picture of himself entering Nick's apartment by detectives, he confesses to entering the building and saying that Nick had offered him $100,000 to kill his parents. He continued, saying, quote, "You're going to think about it when someone offers you $100K. He acknowledged that on February 28th, he traveled to Austin with Nick after Nick threatened to kill his parents. They parked their car in front of the Shaughnessy residence. After arriving at the house, Nick was unable to continue. After that, he returned to the vehicle, and they left for College Station. And all of this is supported by Nick's phone records, which demonstrate that on February 28th, he was at the Shaughnessy house. Johnny attempted to say that was the extent of his involvement, but authorities discovered from his phone records that he was there at the Shaughnessy house when the murder occurred. They were also able to identify the second killer, Arian Smith, thanks to Johnny's phone records. Actually, they had been arrested for narcotics together a year prior. After then, investigators went to speak with Aaron Smith and took him into custody for capital murder. Additionally, he initially denied any involvement. "You know, go chat to my girlfriend," he added. "She will claim that I spent the entire evening with her. Not that I could have been killing people if I'd been with her." She told a completely different narrative, though, when they questioned his girlfriend and sparked her. "She told me he took my car and spent the night by himself in a motel, and despite my repeated attempts to reach him, he never answered." After being presented with this information by detectives, he broke down and confessed to everything, even requesting the death penalty for himself because he felt so horrible. He mentioned he had trouble falling asleep at night. Quote, "I killed somebody," he declared. "I'm deserving of death. As easy as that." He acknowledged that the shot that killed Ted was fired by him. He also claimed to have used Ted's .40 caliber handgun. Thus, the rifle he had used was the one missing from its box on the bureau in Nick's former room. And it had been Nick who had handed it to him. And he took the police right to that weapon. He told them that after the arrests and the release of all this information, Corey ultimately lost his face and neck. He also claimed that on the night they went to the Shaughnessy house to finish the murder, Nick turned off the home security system for them. And Jackie, there was no denying their involvement. It's almost unfathomable that she lost her entire family in a matter of 3 months. Not only was her spouse killed, but their son, whom they loved unconditionally the minute they adopted him, also committed the murder. Their whole universe revolved around him. And the person Ted cherished the most had killed him. That they took in their own murderer is absurd. Corey remarked, quote, "It's very chilling that she had to unknowingly live with her husband's killer for 3 months after that. I purchased every food item. I settled every charge. I purchased clothes for her. They believed they had escaped punishment." Jackie began talking at this point as well, and she totally turned on Nick. All of it was Nick's idea. He took action since he was having financial difficulties and was aware that each of his parents had a $1 million life insurance policy. However, that wasn't his sole motivation. Jackie stated that Nick had informed her that his father was unhappy and despondent, so it would be like doing him a favor. Subsequently, his mother was cruelly forced to live without Ted. "That means we have to murder them both, which is absurd." Corey refuted the statement. Jackie went so far as to say during the interview that she didn't think the depression narrative was true. She further denied knowing any details regarding the situation or the shooter. She never took Nick seriously and said she didn't think he would really follow through with it. You are not this. You adore your parents like these. We visit them every weekend. We enjoy ourselves. We're family. I was constantly envious of what I had with them. I didn't believe Nick had the mental capacity to consider it at all. And for that reason, I never made the effort. Her texts, in which she states we can't afford $50K, but maybe they'll take 10, are so plainly ridiculous. She then took $1,000 out of her bank account to give the murderers their money. Thus, she was aware that she was fully engaged. She says, after all, that she was only following along since she knew he wouldn't carry it out. And she would be there to stop him if he was about to do something crazy. She didn't stop him, though. It's all such bullshit anyway, because she proceeded to live with Corey for 3 months after the incident, fully aware that Nick was the reason she was involved. She also allowed Corey to cover all of her expenses, including rent, groceries, clothing, a diamond pendant, and planning a lavish party. She sobbed with Corey about a tax issue and expressed how much she detested tax things, even though she knew she was to blame. It really is crazy. And why didn't she say anything if she really had nothing to do with it? Why did she tell Corey? Why had she not told the authorities? She had the option to notify the police with an anonymous information about Nick, but instead she spent 3 months crying and living with Corey, letting all of this stuff happen to her. She was obviously completely without guilt, because if she had even the slightest regret, she would have spoken out sooner and alerted someone. She spent months lying to investigators. She spent months lying to everyone. She was subsequently released on bond and permitted to resume her life because she had betrayed Nick and given them this information. She was hanging out with boys, attending college parties, and being a part of bands. It really irritates me. You won't believe it, but things get worse. Nick Shaughnessy is therefore joining me on. Additionally, Aaron Smith was accused of capital murder, a crime that carries a possible sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or even the death penalty. However, in April 2021, the 3 men accepted a sentence of 35 years in jail with the chance of release in exchange for admitting guilt to a lesser charge of murder. Jackie ultimately consented to a plea agreement in June 2023, whereby she would enter a guilty plea to a reduced charge of attempted murderous conspiracy by means of terror threat or other felony. Additionally, the court granted her a procedure known as deferred adjudication, which allows a person to enter a guilty plea, be put on probation, and ultimately avoid being found guilty of a felony in Texas. Therefore, if someone receives deferred adjudication, there is no judgment of guilt. Her total time in county jail was reduced to 120 days. The next 10 years would be spent on probation, and then she would spend 2 days back in jail on the anniversary of Ted's murder each year. However, she has already completed her sentence, having begun serving it in June 2023. I find this sentence to be quite pitiful, and when Nick did wind up doing some interviews last year, he stated that if Jackie hadn't been there, he never would have followed through. Corey also felt that Jackie essentially got away with murder, and that the sentence was incredibly sad. "My husband is dead. My life is over," she murmured. "I'm meant to be deceased." She also receives probation. She also stated, quote, "We open our home and our hearts to you," in her victim impact statement. "And Nicholas and you stole everything away from us. How much longer before you locate another family to ruin? When will Bonnie locate her next Claude? You're a monster. You must be made aware of your bad nature to all." Since his arrest, Corey and Nick have also not spoken. Rather, she composes letters for him, which she never plans to deliver. "Despite my unwavering affection for my child, I no longer love the man that he has become. To be honest, I detest the guy he has become, and I would give anything in the world to be able to speak with his father one more. However, I am unable to. Since ghosts cannot speak and I am meant to be dead, he will not be able to speak with me." In interviews conducted since last year, Nick has since stated, quote, "I wish that I could express how truly sorry I am and that the pain that I caused her was so selfish. And I'm making a constant effort to be the best version of myself in the hopes that one day the world will see it. I am not that person." He acknowledges that he threw away the ideal life and family that he had. He received everything from his parents, all he could have asked for. He gave them all the help he could have gotten, and in return he killed his father and tried to kill his mother. But in this particular circumstance, that is all. I promised you guys that you would be surprised because, As I was doing my study, my jaw dropped. I find it very absurd that they adopted that killer. The anguish Corey must have felt upon learning that not only had her husband been killed, but also one of her dogs, the cute little fur baby, had been killed. And after 3 months, she experiences the same agony all over again when she learns that their son was the one who planned and carried out the murder. It's quite unbelievable. It really is unbelievable.